And start streaming. So we're streaming. Let's see.
And
Should be.
are we live yet?
Yeah, we are, but there's always a delay.
There we
There
are.
we go.
We're live. We're live.
All right, welcome to the Doug and Fur Doug and Fur show,
Doug
everyone.
and Fur show. This is our second episode, and you want to open us up and introduce what we're talking about?
Okay, so last week we were talking about
Civil disobedience.
civil disobedience, and then we said we were going to get into guns just because of how important or how much it relates civil disobedience into guns.
Right. So
So,
specifically,
the Second Amendment.
the Second Amendment right, but we first want to talk about gun crime, gun statistics. We want to kind of talk about objectively the reality of what people could say is the downside of guns.
Yeah.
Because everything is there's a direct every action is an equal and opposite reaction, and we as a people need to figure out what is best for society. You know what I mean? So let's start off with that. I know that you have some material you wanted to go over.
Yeah, I
regards to
mean-
that.
I mean, let's be honest. Nobody wants anybody to die.
Right.
We want the lowest amount of deaths in our country. We don't like when people die. It's sad. It's tragic.
Sure.
And that's what we're going for. We as a society, we want less crime, less gun deaths.
Right.
And it's true, there are a lot of gun deaths in the United States. It's the one with the most gun deaths, I think, in
Yeah, for any
some of the world.
I forget what they basically any thriving declared Western democracy, we are the highest per capita gun deaths.
Yes,
So
yes.
I have heard the argument that says, well, we have more people, but when we actually look at the per capita numbers, so we can be fair and objective, even on a per capita level, we do lead the world as far as Western democracies go in gun deaths.
Yeah, especially in like advanced countries. Like
Right.
we're not going to sit here and deny, there are a lot of gun deaths, and if you do a simple Google search and you start looking that stuff up, you're going to see that it's definitely tragic. We have a lot of gun deaths. I think actually, if I looked at some statistics, the majority of homicides in the United States in 2019 and in the past, I don't know how many years, were because of guns, not knives, not anything,
Right.
because of guns. So that's something we could definitely agree with there, and it's not even an opinion. It's just statistics.
Right.
They're there. We can see them. I did see, however, while looking up
Right.
just some logical arguments, it's hard to find any logical arguments that go the other way. Just because I don't know if it's like Google is biased or something like that, but everything is showing you like.
Right.
Look at how many people die from guns, gun deaths, and it's like, okay, but how many lives do they save?
Right.
How many of these are suicides? Just a bunch of arguments that go the other way. It's hard to find. You really have
Right.
to dig deep, just
Right.
because when you do a superficial Google search, all you're gonna see is guns are bad.
Right, right. and one of the things is I do want to clear up. One of the things is that I know me and you've talked about off air is that how many lives do guns save? That is something that we have to look at from a very objective view because it's very hard and very difficult to say how many lives
Yeah. Yeah.
were saved because you don't know how many. When there is a mass shooter, one, we have to figure out what is declared as a mass shooting. 2 people is not a mass
Yeah.
shooting. Is it 10 people? That is not. There's not a defined
Yeah.
definition of what a mass shooting is. So when you go with just talking about what a mass shooting is, we have to figure out what is a working definition, and there's no universal working definition for a mass shooter.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think we can get into I'm definitely gonna get into that. How many
Okay.
guns? I mean, how many lives guns save? Because
Right.
that's super important. If we're just looking at how many lives they take, but then they save like 20 times as many lives, it's like, okay, cool. So let's take them all away, and then we lose all those lives.
Right.
So there are a lot of statistics, and they all go every which way. And from what it looks like, from both sides, from the conservative standpoint and from the liberal standpoint, everyone's going to find statistics that are going to further their argument.
Right. Right.
In fact,
right.
I heard something that said recently that said, you're going to believe what you're going to believe, and no one's going to change your mind. There are certain topics that you're just set on, and no amount of arguing is going to change your mind. And that's just how humans are, unfortunately. Most people aren't willing to change, and myself included in some
Right.
topics. I'm hard set on some topics, and it's sad. I really want to work on myself, and
Right,
I hope
right,
everyone is willing to work on themselves, to be open to change. That's part of the
Right,
reason
right.
of the podcast.
Right, right, and we want to be objective truth finders, and we want to figure out what's going to be best for a society. Objectively seek that out, and obviously invite other people into the conversation so we can talk about what's going to be best for society. Because we could go to one extreme and say we let anybody get a gun who wants a gun, which is a very extreme view, or we could say take away all the guns. There is an equal and opposite reaction. And typically, when you go to the extremes, it's usually never something that
good.
turns out too good. And we're looking for that moderate place that has downfalls, maybe on both sides, but there's ultimately a place of progression.
Yes.
And that's moving forward.
At the end of the day, no matter how good your gun laws are, there's still going to be gun deaths.
Right.
It's never going to get to zero. We just want to find that ideal medium. I think we should start off by addressing the fact that we're not like other countries. A lot of times we like to compare ourselves to other countries. I don't know, like, these people got rid of guns and they have less gun deaths. And then conservatives, these people got rid of guns and it hasn't changed their crime rate at all.
Right.
We have so many guns in the United States. I think I read a statistics. Actually, I should probably look it up.
I mean, I know for a fact, while you're looking it up, I just want to say I know for a fact we do in this nation have more guns than we have people. And that's something that, you can be upset about or you can be happy about, depending on your personal view.
270
but that is a reality.
million guns.
Well, that's less
from
than
1966. No, yeah. So I think there's more now. I actually read there were like 3 per. Look over here. You see. 1 point something, 326, 393 million. Point is, there are a lot of guns.
Right. We're gonna get a vast amount of difference of statistics going on. This is not something that we pre-looked at, but the reality is that there are more guns in this nation probably than any other. It's probably more readily available to get them legally here than any other place as well.
So just the argument of like, let's get rid of guns.
Right.
Let's be honest, it's impossible. It's impossible. You can't get rid of them. People would have to voluntarily. I mean, if you think about it, what are the ways to get rid of them? Either people voluntarily turn them in with gun buyback programs and things like that.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
Nobody's
That's not
going to
happen
turn in guns. Or you confiscate them. Now, think about the implications of confiscating people's guns. How does that happen? Do you send people house to house?
Right.
Or did you know that the U.S. doesn't have a registry of who owns guns?
Right. There is no federal registry.
The government does not know that I own guns unless they go to the gun dealers,
right,
and they ask them, who did you sell this gun to? They'd have to do, it would cost a lot of money just to find out who has guns.
Right.
Great, now you know who has guns. How do you take them? You send SWAT teams to every person's house to collect their guns. How many people do you think are going to die in that process?
Right, when you're going to collect someone's guns. Nevertheless, when we're going on a little bit side note here, but that's a direct violation of our civil liberties, and it's a direct violation of the Second Amendment.
And even if you don't consider, like, fine, you don't consider it a violation because it went through the amendment process, and we came out with a new amendment that said people don't have the right to bear arms anymore. Somehow magically that happened.
Okay.
Do you think that there's not going to be a civil war?
Right. No. I mean, at that point, you're looking at a national divide.
Yeah,
you're looking at a national divorce because that's embedded in the originalist documents. If you read the Constitution as what it says,
exactly,
and not as a living document that's ever changing.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother probably show of us talking about that. But when we're looking at it as for what it says, there are people that hold that dearly. I am what you would call an originalist. I believe that these values have taken us to where we are today. I know we talked about this maybe on the last show. We have not always upheld the values of the Constitution. But when we do the best we can, and we are constantly doing better of upholding these values, it pushes us and progresses us as a society more and more. And I think that's important to look at it that way. So that being said, it would cause a national divorce because there are a massive amount of the population, I would say at the very least 50%, that look at it that way.
A national divorce is a nice way of saying civil war.
Exactly.
How many people would die in one of those,
Right, exactly.
So I think that no matter where you find yourself on the political spectrum, unless you're like really far left, I think people that are really, really far left think that we should get rid of all guns, but most people think that that's not feasible. Even though they think in theory it would be perfect, it's not feasible. I mean,
Right.
yes, if nobody had a gun, then nobody would die from guns.
Right.
That's just
We would
obvious.
use other means, though.
But
Like,
exactly, we would just kill people any
will
other
kill
way.
people. Like,
And maybe it might be less because it's a lot easier to kill someone with a gun than it is with a knife,
right,
more than it is by strangling them or drowning them. It's a lot
Right.
easier. I'm not going to deny that.
right,
There might be less deaths. I mean, hopefully, I would hope so.
right,
But the point is, I mean, you just can't get rid of all the guns.
right,
So the fact that our country has so many guns and it's impossible to get rid of them through either confiscation or gun buybacks, we just have to start thinking of different solutions because mass gun buybacks are just they're not going to work in the sense that like we're going to get rid of gun crime. I mean, it might
Right.
help, it might not.
Well, we also have to remember, like, there's a cultural issue. Like, people are always pointing to what happened in Australia.
yeah.
That's a culture that's more submissive to their government, and that's also
Yeah.
a government that was not founded on the freedom that the United States is. There's something embedded in us
Yeah,
to do that. I mean, and now there are people who are trying to change that culture, and I disagree with that strongly. But the reality is that right now we have a culture that doesn't believe in that. We have a
Exactly,
culture
it's
who
like-
believes it's their right and their duty, as it is in a constitution, that says we're to throw off such government that wields overbearing power. You know,
If
just
we-
I'm paraphrasing, but we can read that, and I think most people interpret it that way. Even people who disagree with me when we read
Yeah.
that, and that's how most people who have guns are going to interpret
Yeah.
that.
Like if we were to decide to do what Australia did, fine, let's do gun buybacks. It's not just the fact that you're doing it, it's the fact that people have to comply with it.
Right.
And when they don't comply with it, how do you enforce it? That I think that's where the problem comes in. So we start looking at different alternatives, like what else can we do? So we that's where gun control comes in. That's where gun laws come in, like stricter background checks,
Right.
that sort of things, like red flag laws, things like that. If you're not aware, red flag laws are basically if I suspect that my brother is mentally unstable, I report it to some governing agency. I don't know if it's state or local or something like that,
Right.
but and then they would go and they would confiscate my brother's guns,
Right.
for instance. It's kind of like a restraining order. I can file a restraining order against whoever I want, except that if I'm found to be filing a restraining order without cause, like I lie about it, then I'm gonna get prosecuted.
Right.
So, I mean, in theory, it's good, right? Like this person's mentally unstable, but think about how bad that could be used, right? Like I
Sure.
wanna commit a crime. I wanna kill this guy, and he has guns. So I'm gonna go ahead and report him to the government.
Right.
They're gonna
Get rid of his
confiscate his guns, and then I can kill him.
Right.
You know, it's like, what if I'm not mentally unstable and somebody
Right.
reports me? It's kind of unfair. There should be a more fair
Right.
process.
And let's also talk about the mental, you know, the idea that we want mental background checks. That's something that's, you know, very difficult. Like, I know that there's this idea, and I know at face value it sounds great, and a lot of things do, and we have to remember that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that at face value do, but we have to look at the context and the reality in which things are.
Yes.
So mental health background checks for guns, like we say, sounds wonderful, face value.
It does. Don't let mentally unstable people have guns. It just makes
But
sense.
the problem is defined mental instability.
Exactly.
We have to look at things such as the DSM-5, and for those who don't know, the DSM-5 is basically psychologists that come together and they vote basically on what qualifies for certain mental illnesses, and things get put in and get taken out. For instance, gender dysphoria was something that was in the DSM-5 for forever. It was always, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's you know, when we're calling you know, a man who believes he's a woman, or a woman who believes
Like
that they're a man.
transgender.
A transgender. And now we call that transgender. Now that's taken out of the DSM-5. So if we were to say that, you know, that would be somebody who maybe 10 years ago would not be able to get a gun by the standard of having, you know, a mental health evaluation, and now they are able to get a gun.
Yeah.
So my point being is, this is very, whether you agree with the, you know, the trans identity, that's a whole nother podcast of mental illness, or we need to accept it. Regardless of what I'm saying, is that there's a power that can deny or provide people to have guns that you don't want them to have, or people that should have the right to have gun. And
Yeah.
that is an issue because mental health definitions are constantly changing. You do not want the government to have that power because it's one. I mean, it's not even legislating away. It's a group of psychologists basically deciding now
There are a
who
couple
has the
things.
right to the Second Amendment.
I mean, who pays for these? Who pays for these psychological reviews? If it's a right to own a firearm,
right,
and now I have to pay. I mean, we already have to pay a background check. It's only like $5 or
Right.
something, so it's not a huge deal. But now imagine how much are you going to pay for a background for a psychological exam? $200, $500, $1,000. If it's your right to own a firearm, and now you're enforcing things like $1,000 mental exam, that that contradicts your right. And on top of that, believe it or not, having like psychological examinations to own a gun opens doors for discrimination,
sure,
racial discrimination.
absolutely,
Because you can have racist psychologists that fail you just based on your race or your sexual orientation or your religion
Political
or your
views.
political views. They just deny you, and you have to write laws to prosecute those people. It becomes very complicated, and I think it ends up becoming worse for our society.
absolutely.
So I think that perhaps maybe like a more thought out or a better defined red flag law as to where it's not unconstitutional, but you are able to. I mean, I don't know how to do it,
Right,
but
right.
I'm just saying like something that's more.
Right, and we're just bringing this to the table for discussion. We want people to talk about it, and we want to talk about it. We're not saying that we have all the answers.
Yeah, maybe we'll take some calls later to see what people's opinions are.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was what I was talking about with psychological part. Then we have background checks. I think background checks are a great idea. If you have
Right. And if you're a
felonies,
criminal,
then you
that's
should not
that's
get a gun.
objective.
Yeah,
You
and
can't
exactly,
deny,
it's
right?
objective. It's on record, so it's not like you have a mental exam, like a mental physician that can fail you. You know, it's on record. You went to jail. You got booked on this crime.
Right.
You do the background check, so you're denied.
Right.
In fact, the I think Lang was his name. I don't remember, the guy that did Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to get one because he didn't pass the background check, so he had to steal them from his mom.
Right.
So I mean, the gun control law worked in that case. It
Right.
didn't work to prevent the crime, but it did its function. It didn't allow him to purchase a gun, but
Right.
he just went around it and he just got it another way,
Right.
which happens a lot. Most gun homicides in the United States, I wouldn't say most because I'm actually not sure, but
Right.
a lot of gun homicides in the United States are with illegally obtained
Right,
guns.
right. I think the last statistic, and I don't have this quoted, but I believe the last statistic that I actually looked up, and this may not be current, but the last one that I looked up was a few years ago, that 90% of gun homicides were with illegal guns.
Really?
And that's something that we can look up and research.
Yeah, if anybody has
yeah.
any more
We're-
information, feel
free
free to let us know.
Free to challenge me on that. But that being said, that being the case, you know, if you just get rid of guns or just get them out of the hands of a law-abiding citizens, you're really not taking them out of the hands of criminals.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you were to have like the confiscation or whatever,
Right.
and people would comply, the guns are not gone. They're embedded in the society. They're
Right,
still
they're
there.
already there.
Exactly.
Just because you write a law doesn't mean they evaporate.
Exactly.
So
So-
let's talk about this. Let's kind of play devil's advocate here, and I want to ask you questions. What do you say to the person that says, well, if we just get rid of certain guns? The argument that we don't need assault rifles, we don't need, you don't need that to protect your house.
That's where I'm going. That's
Okay.
that's definitely where I'm going. I'm gonna. That's the direction I was headed in, because I feel like most people can agree that they don't want to get rid of pistols. Like most
Right.
people agree with handguns, you know.
Right.
So, I have some statistics here. Let me switch over so that people can see. Let's look at the number of. I think I had this up. Here, the FBI website has the number of deaths in 2017. It's not as current. I did see one in 2019 that was a little more current, but there were a total of 15,000 homicides.
15,000 homicides.
In 2017.
And this is in the U.S.
Yeah, you know what? They can't see this here, so let me put it over this way like this. In 20, oh, they still can't see it. Man. Okay, I think they can see it now.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
you can see here this top number is 15,000 homicides. Um, and if we scroll over here, so firearms, you have handguns and rifles, shotguns and other guns. So let's look over at handguns. 7,000 handguns, 400 rifles. That is
Right.
such a tiny number
Right.
in comparison. So most of these homicides are like either just shooting one person as opposed to mass shootings.
Right.
So the reason people want to get rid of rifles is because of mass shootings.
Right.
You see on the news like, oh, mass shooting, 10 people, 20 people killed at a school. The guy was using an AR-15.
Right.
Right. It's tragic. It's super sad. You know, those are people's children.
Right.
That's their baby girl. That's their baby boy that are being killed by an AR-15. There's no excuse. There's no justification for that. You know, and it's sad. But like I said, it's a society. You're never going to get rid of all the gun deaths.
Right.
So if we look at numbers, I think this is the Washington Post actually, that talks about how many people died in mass shootings. This was in, I think, 2019. 1,246 people were killed in mass shootings out of 10,000 that were killed by rifles in 2017. So the years aren't exactly the same, but you can kind of figure out the percentages, right?
Right.
So 10,000, almost 11,000 killed by guns in 2017.
Right.
In 2019, I think it was higher. And out of that, 1,200 were mass shootings.
So about
And-
10%.
And that's if you define mass shootings as 4 people.
Right.
4 people were killed, not including the shooter. This includes a robbery where one guy shoots 2 people, a stray bullet hits someone else, the cops come and he shoots a cop. That's included in that
Right.
mass shooting, which I don't know. I don't really consider that a mass shooting.
Right. Or drive-by shooting.
Yeah,
you
drive-by
know.
shooting, innocent people get hit. Those aren't the mass shootings we're talking about, and those happen with pistols too.
Right.
In fact, most of those happen with pistols.
Right.
The FBI actually doesn't consider. Sorry, not that they don't consider. They haven't defined those to be mass shootings. They haven't given a direct
Right.
number or anything like that, just because it's so like hard to define. But when most of us think mass shooting, we think of a guy walking into a mall or a
Of
school with a
unarmed
rifle
civilians that have no clue it's coming.
and just start dumping rounds into
Right.
everyone. You know.
And that's, as tragic as that is a very, very small percentage.
Yes.
And my heart goes out to anybody that, had to see that, walk through that, lose somebody to
Yeah.
that. The reality is that that's not happening on a very large level. That's something that's happening on a small level now. We see that in the media, and it's pushed so much on us that we think that that's happening all the time.
Yes,
The mass
yes,
shooting
yes.
is this epidemic. Now, that's a horrific thing that's happening. The reality is it's not all horrific things are epidemics. And
Yeah,
that's
yep,
a reality.
yep.
Things can be terrible and also not be an epidemic. The reality is that kind of mass shooting, the thing that we all see as a mass shooting where a raging lunatic goes, and just dumps rounds on unarmed
Yeah,
civilians,
exactly.
that's a minority. And the reality is that somebody like that is going to do what they have to do. They're going to find a way to do it. We can get rid of the gun. They're going to do a terrible thing in another way. And I grasp the argument that says, oh, we just got rid of all these assault rifles, then he would never be able, he'd have a knife and he'd just kill
Yeah.
a few people.
Yeah, so the devil's advocate point of view would be, well, if you got rid of the rifles, then there wouldn't be any.
Right.
So even if it's a little bit, even if there are only a few mass shootings, get rid of the rifles and there are no mass shootings. That would be even better.
Right.
So I think that has a bigger downfall than it has an upside, and we'll get there.
Right.
But I think we're just looking right now at how many deaths are happening, and that's the problem.
Right.
We're seeing how many people are dying by guns, and that's sad,
Right.
But what about how many people they save?
Right.
I think that's something we should look at. Now, this is a lot harder to do statistically speaking,
Okay.
but I've seen some studies done, and people estimate that around 400,000 life-threatening violent crimes are prevented by using firearms.
Right.
Here's the thing I pulled up. I mean, this may not be I don't know if this is a reliable source or not, as it compared to the FBI website, but feel free to do the research yourself. But I found these here very, very good, and I also saw them in different places. Um, 2.5 million crimes per year, which is 6,800 every day. So just in like 3 days,
Right.
you would prevent the number of total deaths. 400,000 life-threatening violent crimes are prevented.
Right.
60% of convicted felons admitted that they avoiding committed a crime when they knew the victim was armed.
Right.
40% of convicted felons admitted they avoiding committing crimes when they thought the victim might be armed. And felons reported avoid entering houses for fear of being shot. And here's a good one. Fewer than 1% of firearms are used in the commission of a crime. That has to do with number of guns compared to how many are used in crimes. But something else I saw is defensive gun use, which I thought was interesting. It has to do with the fact that most times people use a gun defensively,
Right.
they don't even shoot. I think it was as high as 98%. Just aiming it or displaying it was enough to stop the crime or even possible death.
Right.
And I actually have a story. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but I'll tell you about it right now.
Yeah.
I was walking with a couple of my friends. We had just gone to the pool. Funny thing is, this was when April Fool's, so some of my friends still don't believe this happened. This was literally on April 1st, I think like 2 years ago. We were walking back from the pool, and we were all like, in our bathing suits, whatever, and we're walking to our car. It's like 11 p.m.
Right.
And so we're going this way, and some car pulls up from this side like this, and as we get to this three-way intersection, and I think he gets fairly close to like hitting my friend or pretending he's gonna hit him or whatever. So my friend goes like this or something. He throws his hands up, and I think this person that was driving was drunk, because they lowered their window, and they started saying that they were gonna kill us. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna gun you down." That's what they kept saying. I'm gonna gun you down, and then like we weren't taking them seriously.
Right.
Don't ask me why, but I mean, I always carry my gun with me. But I had it like wrapped up in a towel because I didn't have like my shirt on or whatever. We're walking back from the pool, so I had it wrapped up in my towel. And so he begins to make like he makes his turn, and then we're not taking him seriously, so he begins to make a U-turn. He's like, "Oh, you don't believe me? I'm gonna gun you down right now. Watch, stay right there." All my friends take off running. I turn around and I'm like backpedaling, and he starts like coming towards me now. Now he's finished the U-turn.
In the car. He's coming towards you.
He's coming toward me in the car. The windows are pitch black. I don't know how many people are inside. I don't know who's inside.
Right.
So at this point that he starts coming at me, I pull out my gun and I aim it at the driver's seat. Like sights are locked in right on the driver.
It's crazy.
You know? and guys, I'm telling you, I was this close to pulling the trigger. My finger was on the trigger. I was this close to pulling it. And I don't know. I guess it was the grace of God that's just like, give him one more second. Just give him one more second. And in that 1 second, they could have shot me. A million things are going through my head. I'm like,
Right.
Is he reaching into the glove compartment? How many people are there? I'm like looking for things. I can't see anything. So I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to shoot
Right.
to save myself. And like with that one split second I gave him, he just slammed on his brakes. He's like, chill, I'm leaving. And he turns around and leaves. Now, I don't know if he was faking it. I don't know if he was actually had a gun and was going to scare us. I don't know if he actually intended to shoot us.
Was he going to hit you with the car? I mean, whatever.
I have
the
no
case
idea.
Was.
I have no idea, but I know that I felt a lot safer, and
Right.
I feel like the fact that I had a gun that day definitely either saved me and my friends' lives, or even if it wasn't a life-threatening thing, it definitely saved us from possibly becoming the victims of a crime.
Right.
Who knows? The point is, you never think you need it until you need it.
Right.
And that's just one example. Like, it happened to me, and it happens to so many people. I didn't have to shoot.
Right.
So guns save a lot of lives.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. But one of the things is, when we get into these statistics, is we really don't know, and we can't really prove how many lives they save. Was this guy just drunk and full of
Exactly.
hot air? Or did he have an AK and was ready to mow down you and however 6-7 friends you had with you?
Exactly.
I mean, we could say, oh, it saved 7 lives, or was this guy just
he was just faking. Exactly.
Right, exactly.
It's so hard
we don't really know. The point is, I believe we have the right to protect ourselves, and I feel
of
much
course.
safer having guns in a responsible gun owner's hands rather than not. And the reality is that one way or the other, that time's going to come, and it is going to save lives at some point. And we have to have faith in the fact that that's something that's better. I believe that more control in the citizens' hands is far better than more control in the government's hands.
Yeah. Especially if you have a family and you have children. I mean, it's one thing to be anti-gun, but I mean, if you picture your family, your wife, your baby girl, your children or whatever, a criminal breaking into your house and doing unspeakable things like, I don't know, torturing them, raping them, or whatever, and you're completely defenseless.
Right.
Can you picture that? Wouldn't you feel terrible knowing that you had the option to go out and buy a gun as a law-abiding citizen and defend your home?
Right.
So that's where I think we're reaching the section of the podcast where we're going to say most of us agree that pistols are okay.
Right.
And we don't want to get rid of guns entirely, and even if we did, we know it's not feasible. So we're talking gun control, stricter background checks, getting rid of assault rifles, that sort of thing. Right. And to that, I would point to the fact that I just said, and I showed you guys online, that assault rifles are like less than 10%.
Right.
It's like
not a major percentage. I think it is. You said 15,000 and it's 400.
I can't math correctly right now.
So let's do that.
10,000 divided by, what was it, like 800? 12.5%?
No, that's got to be.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I did it backwards, guys.
Yeah. That's definitely got to be.
8%.
0.8%.
No, you got to move the decimal over too.
Okay. 0.08%.
No. You got to move the decimal over too, so it's 8%.
8%?
Yeah, 8%, which is still insanely low. So if you look at the fact that rifles only account for 8% of gun homicides, I don't think that getting rid of rifles would get rid of that percentage. I just think they would have used a pistol.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I can't use my rifle, I'll just use a pistol. I don't think it's going to get rid of it. Maybe it'll drop the numbers like 100 or something.
Right.
Not a lot, but I don't think it's going to make a huge deal. But I think that rifles serve a bigger purpose than most of us are aware.
Right. I think we take it for granted, and this is where we can kind of talk about this, where we talk about the mass shootings that don't happen anywhere else, but they happen here, and it's because we have assault rifles, we have AR-15s, you can get an AK-47. It's not hard to turn these into automatic weapons. This is a problem in the United States. This is an argument from somebody that would be not on the side that I'm necessarily on, although I do believe these things are true. And let's just play devil's advocate. Why shouldn't we get rid of them? Why should we not just have pistols to protect our home? Why do we need these not fully automatic weapons, but semi-automatic weapons that are very easy to turn into fully automatic weapons?
That's what I hear
Why is America the one that lets this happen? Why do we not have these things happening in Western Europe and stuff like that? Because they got rid of all the guns. So this is something that they feel safer for.
What I hear a lot, what I hear mostly is, you don't need an AR-15 to hunt.
Right.
And you don't need an AR-15 to defend your home. And President Joe Biden said, just grab your shotgun and fire 2 blasts or whatever.
Right.
And I hear things like that, and you're right, you don't need an AR-15 to hunt. You could probably do it with a single-shot rifle or something like that.
Sure.
Or whatever, you
don't need that to protect your house. Pistols are pretty good for protecting against.
You don't need 30 rounds in your magazine to hunt or protect your house or whatever. You're right, you don't.
Right.
And that's not the purpose of it. That's what people are like. That argument is invalid. The Second Amendment is not you have the right to bear arms to hunt.
Right.
Or to defend your family. It says in a well-regulated militia.
Right.
Militia being obviously for foreign, but also to protect yourself from a tyrannical government.
Absolutely.
And you can't fight tanks with pistols.
Right. You can't fight a military, actual armed men with pistols.
Exactly.
And, we just be very clear, the Second Amendment is solely as a check and balance. This nation was built off of checks and balances.
Yeah.
And the Second Amendment was the last line of defense for us as American citizens to protect as a final check our freedom from a tyrannical government.
Yeah, it's tough enough as it is with these single-shot rifles, with the semi-automatic rifles, when they have fully automatic weapons, like machine guns, they have tanks, they have bombs, they have planes. It's hard enough to defend themselves as it is. So there's the argument that I hear a lot, which is, guys, we can't beat the government anyway. They're significantly stronger than us. Well, the government doesn't work that way. The government's just not going to bomb its people and shoot its people.
There'll be nothing left to rule over.
Exactly. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Human nature doesn't work that way.
And in fact, there's I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Bundy Ranch or something like that. This guy was wrong, or I think from the story I read is he was morally not in the right. But basically, long story short, is he had some land, and the government claimed the land was the government's, and he claimed the land was his, and he had some cattle on the land. And after the government kept finding him and telling him to move the cattle off, he didn't do it. Eventually, they removed the cattle for him. I think they grabbed some helicopters and rounded the cattle up or something like that. So Bundy called for an armed protest, and people from all over the nation showed up, and they blocked highways, armed. And then the FBI showed up, and they had like a standoff.
Right.
And eventually they said, just let him have it, whatever.
Right.
So that's an example. Like, could they have just gone into an all-out shooting? Yes, they could have. But the government isn't particularly looking to make enemies of the people.
Right.
And to have mass casualties at the hands of police, that's just not going to help their image.
Right.
Something like that happened in Waco already.
Right.
And it was definitely not good.
Right.
So that's the way that the government works in that sense is not, let's just destroy our people,
Right.
But they definitely could oppress you.
Right.
If you don't have a way to defend yourselves. And we can easily point to Venezuela, my home country.
Right.
My cousin, I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry.
No, I want to, no, it's good.
My cousin, from Venezuela, he would come to the United States, and he would make fun of us and our guns all the time, and saying, you guys don't need that, blah, blah, blah. You guys
and
are
this is
before things went.
Yeah, okay. So when they voted guns out, basically.
Yeah, I mean, gun laws were always a little stricter over there.
Okay.
But they were still allowed to have them under certain circumstances.
Sure.
And so anyway, he would always make fun of me. I mean, some of it was joking around, but obviously there was some truth behind it.
Right.
And if you're watching this, I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot. But anyway, so he leaves. And now he unfortunately for him, and I feel horrible for him and his now wife, they experienced some of those hardships down there, you know. They were in some of the protests. They got tear gassed. They saw people die in front of them at the hands of the government. The government just opened fire on them. And they were completely unable to defend themselves.
They have nothing. They don't have pistols there. They don't.
They have nothing. They were throwing Molotov cocktails and rocks.
Right, and that's about what do you do with that up against even a handgun? Never mind, fully automatic.
So my
weapons.
cousin and his girlfriend at the time, they're married now. Congratulations. They had to run, and luckily they made it out. And he comes back to the States because his wife won the lotto visa, and he's living here now with her. And he's like, you were right, I was wrong. He's like, if we would have had some guns, we could have done something.
Right.
And it's true. And that's what we're trying to prevent. The same thing happened in Nazi Germany in 1933.
Right. That was the greatest, idea that we, this idea of pie in the sky, utopia, that just doesn't exist. And that's not me trying to just, put somebody down who believes in that. But the reality is this is a world that's going to have flaws. It's going to have issues. And when somebody is presenting you with an idea of a utopia, we're going to get rid of all guns and everything's going to be wonderful. That is always, historically, there has not been a time where that has not been backed by a government trying to have more control over you. Do they use it right away all the time? No, that's typically not how it works. But it's knowing now that we have a control over you. And the reality is that there are people that are, ashes, just to be completely real about it, because they believe this. And Nazi Germany is a primary example. They got rid of all the guns. The people were completely unable to defend themselves.
Especially they were systematically targeting Jews. They were disarming Jews. And I was saying that the government won't kill its people, I meant that they won't kill its people when their people are armed, because there's going to be a large civil war. There's going to be casualties on their side too. But when their people are completely unarmed, I mean, they're not going to kill everyone, but they're going to kill enough people to intimidate and oppress their people.
Right.
And we've seen it time and time again throughout history. This has happened all throughout history. This isn't something that's new.
Right.
And that's why we need rifles.
Right. And the idea is the idea is that I think we come to this idea, as people that are in the West and Western democracies, that we've progressed as people, and that's nonsense. That can't happen again. We have to remember that Germany was one of the most educated societies of its time, and that was the same thought process then. They thought that we're so much far ahead of this. This is not that long ago. This is 80 years ago. This didn't happen in an undeveloped nation. This happened in Western Europe 80 years ago.
And
they had the
technology.
same exact thought process that can't happen here. And the idea that we think that human nature has changed. Human nature doesn't change. As much as we progress, human nature doesn't change. What happened before can happen again, and it will happen again. The reality is that if we refuse to learn from history, the harsh reality is we are damned to repeat it. And that's a little harsh, but I do believe it's important to be strong on that. We have to look at that.
I mean, we've seen it.
Yeah, and it happens time and time again. So when we talk about this idea of, when we look at societies, we can't just go one extreme or the other. We have to look at there's going to be pros and cons to every decision. If we go completely extreme, there may be some very high pros but very high cons, and the same on the other. We go to the balance. The balance is not utopia. If we think we're going to find this area, it is not. There's going to be losses. So when I look at the Second Amendment and I look at the idea of us having, assault rifles that are available for people, also very easily for you to make assault rifles into fully automatic rifles. And we say that, we have these mass shootings that don't happen anywhere else. Well, the reality is, and this is real, and people may think that you're crazy for this thinking, but the reality is a lot of these countries that don't have these mass shootings, but because they only have, handguns, they're really one tyrannical government away. And some of these nations are very close to, electing somebody that's a little more harsh. You're a few generations away from, ending up in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And that's a reality. We think that doesn't going to happen in these Western democracies. Where we look at very clearly, Venezuela was a very wealthy country. It was the third wealthiest country in the entire, North and South America.
My
It's the United
grandparents-
States, it was Canada, and it was Venezuela.
Yeah,
Go
I mean
ahead.
the reason I was born there is because my grandparents left where they were because it was doing very poorly at the time from Portugal, and they went to Venezuela because it was one of the richest countries, and that's where my dad met my mom.
Right.
So it was a very wealthy nation. They had
Right.
so much natural resources, and they are very good and smart, developed people with the best universities.
Right.
So all it takes is a couple years, maybe 20 years, to head down that route. Like people think like, oh, that's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Right. No.
But from the time Chavez took power to now, I think what's it been like 20 years?
Right.
So
And
a
look what's
little more than
happened.
20 years. So it doesn't take that long. It can happen within your lifetime if we're not careful.
Right.
So
And then we have to ask ourselves, and this is just a question that I want to leave, anybody who's listening to this, is do you want to take the risk of getting rid of all guns if you're on that extreme and open yourself up to a tyrannical, oppressive government that sends us into regression as
Yeah.
a people? Or do you want to take the risk and have this final line of defense and realize there are cons to it? There's pros and cons to everything. But I believe it is worth it to have that out there as our Second Amendment right and realize there are going to be issues with that. But the reality is those issues are not really the government's job. That's more of us being a people. That gets into a whole nother topic of social fabrics and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
people influencing their communities and taking care and being there for the fatherless and the people that are
Yeah.
having a hard time. It's not really the government's job to make sure people are behaving correctly. That's our job to take care of our communities
yeah,
as
your
individuals.
as a family, to teach your kids.
Right, and to be, as men, fathers to the fatherless, that don't have that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother podcast. But the reality is that I believe it is much better to have this final check on power, which is the Second Amendment, where we do have assault rifles, because the alternative of getting rid of that and maybe having less mass shootings,
yes.
which
Yes.
statistically aren't that many, horrible that even one happens, but statistically aren't that many, it is worth that sacrifice rather than the sacrifice of having a tyrannical government that will kill millions. And
Look,
that's a reality. It's a harsh reality, but history tells us that's
just
what happens when we do this.
just to sum it up. All right. What was it? 840 deaths due to rifles in 2017. 840.
Right.
You get rid of all rifles, that number isn't going down completely. They're just going to do it with pistols. But let's say it goes down. Even if it was to go down, all 840, let's pretend the people that were using rifles are just like, oh man, I have no rifle, I'm not going to kill.
Right.
Let's just pretend that that's what happened. 840. Fine, you get rid of the rifles and you save yourself those 840 people. This sounds terrible. I understand this sounds terrible. It sounds like I have no concern for human life. But
We lost video.
oh, did the camera went out. Well, you guys can still hear us, so I'll keep talking while I try to fix this.
We're sorry. We at least still have audio, and we
Yeah,
want to
battery
wrap
power.
this up here shortly. But did the camera die?
Yeah, I'm gonna see it. You can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's just something that's very important for us to look at and to describe. We have to look at the Second Amendment. It's something that's very important for us. Whether you're a believer of gun rights or not, I think it's something very important for us to look at. It is the Second Amendment for a reason. And I do believe this is the final protector, the final check on balance for all the for all the amendments of our Constitution, which is all of our freedoms. And I think that also leads into something that's very important when we talk about the freedom of speech, and that's something that we're going to probably touch on either this next following podcast, maybe even the one after that. We haven't decided that yet, but that's so vital for that freedom of speech. That being said, the only thing that truly protects freedom of speech, which was ultimately where all of our freedoms come from, is what's protecting the freedom of speech is the Second Amendment. If you get rid of the Second Amendment, we totally lose our freedom of speech, which is an entire new podcast.
That one's low. Here's another one. I'm gonna
All
put
right.
it.
All right, we're actually working on this right now. I think we're about to get video back any second now, so just hang tight with us for another second.
Said that it was full on battery when we started, and then like all of a sudden it died out.
So, but I think Fernando's going to come back and finish his final point here, and that's probably going to be wrapped up. And we are back on. Thank you.
Oh, that was quick. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So your final point, you said it sounds horrible, but
Yeah.
everything comes with cost. Everything comes with a pro and a con. Every action comes with an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah, so that compared to how many people died in World War II, like 80 million, 88 million.
Yeah, globally.
So, yeah, well, as I'm not saying that 88 million people died because we got rid of guns, but it was a catalyst.
Right.
So, even if you say not that many people as a direct result of getting rid of guns, the point is it's a lot more than 800.
Right. Well, would Hitler have been able to start off being the totalitarian in the first place if there was an armed people? That
I
would
don't
have
think
stopped
so.
and been a check on that balance of power right there at the front
Yeah,
door.
I don't
You
think
cut
so.
it off at the head.
Because I think that they would have been able to start fighting back right away, and if they couldn't hold their own, I mean, most likely Hitler would have either backed down or foreign nations would have come in to help, and it would have been stopped.
Absolutely.
The atrocities of the Holocaust might not have happened.
Right.
So that's my point with regards to that.
Yeah.
I do want to make some technical points, but if you have anything to say, no.
I was gonna sign us off if you had something else to say.
I wanted to talk some technical points, because when we talk about gun control, it's different in every state. Some states, like California, your magazine can't have more than 10 rounds. I think Trump banned bump fire stocks.
Yeah.
Just things like that, right? The ATF puts regulations on suppressors, automatic weapons, and short-barreled rifles. So, for example, you can't buy automatic weapons unless they were made before 1986. So, how much sense does that really make?
Right.
Okay, so you can't buy automatic weapons unless they were made before 1986. I don't want people to have automatic weapons. Don't get me wrong. I personally would never use automatic. I think it makes you inaccurate and it's ineffective. even if I was in combat. In fact, most soldiers, when they train them in semi-automatic.
Right.
But if you can still get an automatic weapon just because it was made prior to 1986 doesn't mean that it's any less deadly.
Right.
What happens is that inflation went up like crazy because there are now a limited number of guns made before 1986. So what would normally cost you $1,000 or $2,000 now cost upwards of $15,000 to $20,000.
Right, because there's a supply and demand issue.
Exactly. So now it's like, okay, so they banned bumpfire stocks. If you're not familiar with what a bumpfire stock is semi-automatic, because people hear the word automatic and they think like, oh, it's like, oh, brrrr, you know. Semi-automatic is one shot per trigger pull. You pull the trigger, one shot comes out, you have to release and pull it again. So it really limits the speed at which you can shoot. So with a semi-automatic rifle, so what they did with bumpfire stocks, it's the stock is the part that goes up against your shoulder on a rifle. And if I had a rifle, I would show you. You can get an airsoft rifle from me somewhere around there. So the stock is the part that goes up against your shoulder, and the bumpfire stock, what it does is it does this technique where it helps you by compressing it. This part right here, and this is an airsoft gun. This part right here, it's like an attachment for the stock that compresses it, so it kind of helps that when you pull the trigger, the next shot kind of lands into your finger. It's a technique that you have to learn and practice by going to the range, but it really increases your rate of fire. Right now, these bumpfire stocks are expensive, and the funny part is that they banned that. It's so easy. I can buy an auto sear for like a couple bucks,
Right.
and then drill a hole in my AR-15 and turn it into an automatic.
Right.
So the fact that they banned bumpfire stocks doesn't mean that I can't have an automatic gun. I can easily make it. Yeah, sure, it's against the law, but if I'm a criminal, I really don't care.
Right.
So just little things like that, like, okay, California bans magazines that are bigger than 10 rounds, so a 30-round magazine is banned. Well, guess where it's not illegal? In the state right next over. They can just buy one and bring it in.
Right.
Do they have security points at every road going into California where they're going to check? Sure, it's illegal. If you get caught with it, you're going to get prosecuted. But if I'm a criminal, I don't care. My
Right.
gun is probably illegal anyway.
Right.
Just things like that. Like the one that really gets me is short-barreled rifles. So you cannot have a rifle where the barrel is shorter than, I think it's 16.5 inches, because then it's considered a short-barreled rifle.
Right.
So the way they get around it is they have a rifle with like a small barrel, 10, 7 inches, whatever. It looks just like a rifle, but they take out the stock. So now it's considered a pistol. It's not a rifle, it's a pistol, which is totally legal. And then you just put a stock on it that's called a stabilizing brace. It's not really a stock. It's meant to be shot like this,
Right.
by holding your arm straight out. And so if you shoot it like this by holding your arm straight out, you're good. As soon as you put it on your shoulder, you're a felon. How much does this make sense?
Right.
So like if I'm a criminal, do I really care if I put it on my shoulder?
Right.
You know, or forget the stabilizing brace. I'll just buy a real stock and put it on there.
Right.
It's these types of laws that politicians make
Right.
without knowing anything about guns.
Right.
So, and this happens not just in guns. This happens with everything. Politicians are making laws in things they know nothing about.
Right.
So if you know nothing about the economy, get a group of economists that can help you build the economy.
Right.
If you know nothing about guns, get gun experts that can help you make gun laws.
Right.
But don't make gun laws on things you know nothing about.
Right. And that goes back to a point that we talked on the last podcast. It's on us to vote these people in. It's on us to
Yeah.
see, are there people that think that they have all the answers to things? Are these people that are going to look to experts in specific fields and then create policy and shape policy based off of what
Yeah.
the influence of an expert is? Not that I say that I want all experts we just need to hire experts in every field, because an expert in one field, there's also an equal and opposite reaction to
There's
another
yeah.
area of life. So that's why we have politicians that should be getting collective information from multiple perspectives
Yep.
and
Yep.
shaping policy based off that. And that's on us, the American people, to vote our senators, our governors, our congressmen, yes, our presidents, even down to our local mayors,
Yeah.
with people that are looking to shape policy. Not because they have all the answers, but they are going to seek a clear and balanced way of thinking.
Yeah, 'cause then
and
you
shape
have-
policy based off of a collectives of, specific experts.
You end up having laws that make no sense.
Right,
That look
exactly.
silly. The people who know about the topic, the law looks silly. Like I'm
Right.
sure certain laws regarding COVID look silly to doctors. Doctors might be thinking, I don't know what the situation is now, but doctors might be thinking, oh, this does nothing, or they should do it this way or that way. And then the politicians are just making laws based on like all this noise they hear from people.
Right.
So I think what I look at, and I think what everybody should look at when electing officials is, one, do their beliefs and policies align with my beliefs, and two, who are they surrounding themselves with?
Right.
Are they making all these decisions themselves, or are they getting experts in the fields to help them make these decisions? I think those are the most important things, not the person's personality, not what they do in their own life,
Right.
and not what they tweet.
Right,
You know,
right,
yes,
right.
all that stuff affects,
Right.
but when your two options are when it's between A and B, you're gonna want to pick the person who aligns with your views and surrounds themselves with people.
Right. Right. How are they going to
so-
shape policy?
Exactly.
And that's what's important.
Exactly. How are they going to shape policy?
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't know what our next topic is going to
Yeah,
be.
we're gonna discuss it. I mentioned when you're gone, we might do the First Amendment, but there's a lot of great things. I
Yeah.
think we have
I think speech
a
is a
lot
good
of
one.
a lot of great ideas. But if you have any ideas, it's a topic that you want to hear about, please let us know. If there's something in regards to this that you agreed or disagreed with,
We didn't.
please let us know about that as well.
We didn't allow anybody to call in.
Right in our inboxes.
I guess we can still hear. I'll put up the number. And I guess we can give them a couple minutes. I don't know. If no one calls in, then we'll just hang up.
Yeah.
Oh, oops.
What are we
I gotta
good for?
start
What are we
typing.
on for time?
We're like at 55 minutes, so we'll give them a couple.
Yeah, we'll be on for a few more minutes. If somebody wants to call in, it'd be great to have you call in.
Call that number right there.
Because we want to hear your thoughts on the Second Amendment. We want to hear your
I'm gonna put this a
ideas.
little lower,
There we go.
or maybe here.
No, a little lower, a little lower.
Oh, it takes a little bit to refresh there. I was putting it under actually.
Oh, okay. But we want to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts. We want to hear what you have to say. This is not just about us, but we want to hear your thoughts on the Second Amendment. We want to hear your thoughts on even potentially another topic that you'd want to hear. This is just a show that we want to be interactive, and we want to have that. So if there's anybody who is on and wants to give us a call, please do.
Maybe next time we can put this number at the beginning, so
Right.
so somebody could call towards the beginning if they wanted to. And if you're gonna watch this later, which most people are, you can either comment or
Call,
reach out or let us know.
Yeah. Send it to either one of our inboxes, and that would be great to have.
Yeah, you can DM us, whatever. And obviously we won't be able to talk about the topic live like we are now, but we can address it maybe in the next one or something like that. Or if you're really interested, maybe one day we can have you on.
Yeah, we'd love to.
So there's only one person watching live. Kind of sad. All right, so we'll stop it then.
All right, this is the Doug and Fur Show. Until next time.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.